Darius Wells was 38 years old, and until that Thursday evening, he believed he had built something worth protecting. He had walked away from a nearly launched engineering firm in Atlanta, 6 years of his own ambition set aside, so his wife Adrienne could take her dream job in Charlotte. He cooked her dinners, he ran the household, he showed up every single day, in every way that counted. That evening, Adrienne texted him, "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." So Darius did what a good husband does. He cooked her favorite meal, shrimp and grits with andouille, packed it carefully into the canvas bag she had gifted him, the one with her handwritten note still tucked inside reading, "For my favorite errand man," and drove to her office to surprise her. The lobby security guard waved him through with a grin. "She's a lucky woman, Mr. Wells." Darius smiled. "I'm the lucky one." He stepped off the elevator on the 6th floor, canvas bag in hand, and rounded the corridor toward her glass-partitioned office. What he saw stopped him cold. His wife, her boss, together, in a way that told him this was not the first time, and had never been about work. He stood there, canvas bag still in hand, her dinner going warm inside it. And what he discovered next would expose a betrayal 2 years deep, one that had cost him everything while he smiled and never suspected a thing. But in that corridor, in that moment, Darius Wells made a decision, and nothing would ever be the same. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The engine didn't lie. That was the thing Darius Wells had always appreciated about machines. You put your hands on them, you listened, you paid attention, and eventually they told you the truth. No games, no performance, just cause and effect, clean and honest. He pressed 2 fingers against the valve cover gasket and felt the soft give where there shouldn't be any. There it was, not the alternator like the owner had been told at the last shop, not the battery. A $17 gasket and about 40 minutes of honest labor. "I'm telling you," Jerome said from somewhere beneath a lifted Silverado 2 bays over, his voice carrying easy across the concrete floor. "That man looked me dead in my face and said his check engine light had been on for 3 years. And he wanted to know if it was serious." Darius almost smiled. "What did you tell him?" "I told him the car had been trying to break up with him for 3 years, and he just wasn't listening." This time Darius did smile, though no one was looking. He reached for a clean rag and wiped his hands, already calculating what the repair would actually cost versus what the other shop had quoted. He'd call the owner in an hour. He'd tell him the truth. That was the whole job, far as Darius was concerned, not just the mechanical part, the telling the truth part, too. Wells and Banks Auto sat on a quiet stretch of Eastway Drive, wedged between a Caribbean restaurant that smelled incredible on Fridays and a laundromat with a hand-painted sign that had been fading since 2019. The building was nothing special from the outside. A wide, low-slung garage with 4 bays, a small waiting area with chairs Darius had reupholstered himself, and a hand-lettered sign above the door that Jerome's mother had painted when they opened. But the neighborhood knew the shop. They trusted it. People drove past 3 other garages to get here, and Darius understood that kind of trust was not given. It was built piece by piece, the same way you built anything worth having. Jerome rolled out from under the Silverado and sat up, pulling off his safety glasses. He was a broad man with an easy face that defaulted to laughter, and he had been Darius's closest friend for going on 11 years. He knew Darius the way you only know someone you've worked beside, in real time, in the unglamorous hours, with grease on your hands and no audience to perform for. "Yo," Jerome said, tilting his head slightly. "Atlanta called again. Did I tell you that?" "Which client?" "Not a client. Marcus Webb. Says the commercial district project is finally getting permits pushed through." Jerome paused, just long enough. Said he wished you were still around for it. Darius didn't respond right away. He set down the rag and reached for the torque wrench. That particular silence was one Jerome understood well enough not to fill. 6 years ago, Darius had been 60 days from launching Cross-Meridian Engineering, a precision consultancy he'd spent 3 years building toward, piece by piece. Nights and weekends, favors and phone calls, and a business plan that his Uncle Ray had read twice and called solid as concrete. He had clients lined up. He had a small office space reserved in Midtown Atlanta. He had a future he had designed himself, with his own hands, the same way he did everything else. Then Adrian got the call from Holt and Meridian Group, Senior Director of Development, Charlotte, North Carolina. The kind of opportunity she had been working toward since before he met her. She had stood in their Atlanta kitchen and held the phone against her chest, and looked at him with an expression that was equal parts joy and apology. And he had told her, without hesitation, without performance, "Then we go." He walked away from the consultancy. He found Jerome already in Charlotte. They pooled what they had and built the shop. It was good work, real work. The neighborhood needed it, and Darius was glad to give it. He told himself that, often enough, that it had stopped feeling like something he needed to tell himself. He made shrimp and grits that evening. The real version, andouille, sharp cheddar, a little heat, the one Adrienne always said she could eat every single day. He had the table set by 7. She came through the door at 7:40, with her bag over her shoulder and her eyes already somewhere else. She kissed his cheek. She sat. She moved the food around her plate in the distracted way of someone whose mind was still very much at the office. "Long one?" he asked. "The Mercer account," she said. "It's almost there. Just a lot of moving pieces." He nodded. He poured her water. At 8:15, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and something shifted in her face. Quick, almost invisible. She stood up from the table. "I have to take this," she said. "Sorry, babe." The bedroom door closed behind her. Darius sat alone at the table with the 2 plates, the good candles he'd lit out of habit, and the sound of her voice coming through the door. Low, warm, and entirely different from the voice she'd been using all evening. She came out 20 minutes later, almost glowing. "Good news," she said, setting her phone face down on the counter. "A deal's finally moving forward." "Good," Darius said. "That's good." He began clearing the table. He watched her drift toward the couch, easy and light in a way she hadn't been when she walked through the door. He noticed. He said nothing. He filed it away. The text came in at 4:47 on a Thursday afternoon. Darius was under the hood of a Camry when his phone buzzed in his shirt pocket. He wiped his hand on his thigh and pulled it out. Big client dinner ran long. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." He read it once. He typed back, "Okay. Take care of yourself." He meant it. That was exactly the kind of man he was. He put the phone away and finished with the Camry. By 6 o'clock, the shop was locked, and Jerome had gone home, and Darius was standing in his own kitchen staring into the refrigerator at the shrimp he'd bought Tuesday. He hadn't planned on cooking tonight, but his hands were already moving, pulling out the andouille, the cheddar, the cast-iron skillet that had belonged to his grandmother before it belonged to him. Some habits were older than thought. He cooked the full amount, didn't scale it down, didn't make half a portion. He made it the way he always made it, the right way, with the heat built slow and the cheese added at the end so it melted in instead of sitting on top. He tasted it once with a wooden spoon and adjusted the salt, and then stood over the stove for a moment in the quiet kitchen with the steam rising around him. The table was empty. He found a container in the cabinet. A good one, the kind that actually sealed. He packed her portion carefully and snapped the lid down. He grabbed 2 packets of hot sauce from the junk drawer because she always wanted more than he put in. He pulled a bottle of sparkling water from the back of the refrigerator. Her brand, the one with the green label she special ordered by the case. Then he looked around the kitchen for something to carry it all in. The canvas bag was hanging on the hook by the door where it always hung. She'd given it to him 2 birthdays ago. A wide, sturdy thing in dark olive green, with leather handles and her small, neat handwriting on a folded note tucked into the inside pocket. He'd never removed the note. He didn't know exactly why. It just felt like the kind of thing you left where it was. He opened the pocket now and glanced at it out of habit, the way you glance at a familiar picture on the wall. For my favorite errand man. Love, A. He smiled at it. He folded it back in. He loaded the container, the hot sauce, the sparkling water. He grabbed a plastic fork and a folded paper towel from the counter. She always used a paper towel as a napkin when she ate at her desk. Said the real ones were too formal for takeout. He knew that about her. He knew 100 small things like that. He was still smiling when he got in the truck. The Holton Meridian building was a glass-fronted mid-rise off South Tryon, the kind of building that looked expensive from the outside and felt corporate the moment the doors opened. The lobby was almost empty this late. The cleaning crew had the far end of the floor. The front desk was staffed by a single security guard. An older man named Pete, with close-cropped white hair and reading glasses, pushed up on his forehead. Pete recognized Darius from the dozen times he'd been through before and broke into a wide grin. "Mr. Wells." He nodded at the canvas bag. "She working late again?" "Said she was," Darius said. "Figured she hadn't eaten." Pete shook his head slowly, something warm and admiring in the expression. "She's a lucky woman, Mr. Wells. I tell my wife about you. She says men like you are hard to find." Darius laughed a little. "I'm the lucky one." Pete waved him toward the elevator without asking him to sign in. He never did. The 6th floor was dim. Most of the overhead lights were off, and the space had the specific quiet of an office past business hours. Chairs empty, monitors dark, the low hum of the ventilation the only sound. Darius walked the familiar path toward Adrienne's office, the canvas bag hanging from his left hand. Then he heard music, soft, deliberate, the kind of music that had nothing to do with work. He slowed, without meaning to. Something in his chest made a small adjustment, like a gear shifting into a different position. He kept walking. The glass partition of Adrienne's office came into view gradually, by degrees. First the edge of the interior light, then the outline of her desk, then the 2 people on the other side of the glass. Darius stopped. Adrienne was seated on Fletcher Holt's lap, not startled, not uncomfortable. She was laughing at something he had just said, her head tilted back slightly, her hand resting flat against his chest in the easy, unthinking way of a person who had done it many times before. Fletcher's hand was at her waist, settled and familiar. They were close in the way that takes a long time to become. Darius stood in the hallway and looked at his wife through the glass. In his left hand was the canvas bag, the container of food still warm, 2 packets of hot sauce, her sparkling water, the note in the inside pocket in her own handwriting. He did not move for what felt like a very long time. Then he reached into his pocket. He took out his phone. He raised it, and through the glass, he took a photograph. Then he turned around and walked back to the elevator. He sat in the truck for 45 minutes. The canvas bag was on the passenger seat. He didn't move it. He didn't touch it. He sat with his hands in his lap and looked through the windshield at the concrete wall of the parking garage and let what he had seen settle into him slowly and completely, the way something heavy sinks in deep water. He did not cry. He did not call anyone. He did not make a sound. He made a decision. He was not going to break. He was not going to walk back up there and blow the whole thing open before he knew exactly what he was looking at. What he'd seen told him one thing clearly. This was not new. The way she laughed. The way his hand sat at her waist like it belonged there. That took time. That took repetition. If this wasn't new, there was more, and he needed all of it. Every last piece, before he moved a single inch. He drove home with the canvas bag on the passenger seat, and the city moving past his windows like it didn't know anything had changed. He walked into the house, set the bag on the kitchen counter, left it right there in the middle, where she would see it if she looked. He went upstairs. He undressed in the dark. He got into bed and lay on his back and stared at the ceiling. At 10:32, he heard her key in the lock. He listened to her move through the first floor, the soft sounds of cabinets opening and closing, the faint rush of water from the tap. He did not hear her stop. He did not hear the specific silence that would mean she'd noticed the bag sitting there on the counter with the food still packed inside it. Then the shower came on. He lay still while the pipes moved in the walls. He was still breathing slow, and even when she came out and moved around the bedroom in the dark, careful not to wake him, she slid into bed. Within 10 minutes, her breathing changed. She slept. He did not. He was up before her alarm. He had coffee ready when she came downstairs, still smoothing her blazer, her hair pulled back and everything about her composed and professional and entirely normal. He handed her a mug without being asked. "Thank you," she said. She looked at her phone. She took a sip. "How'd the dinner go?" he asked. His voice came out level, warm even. "Long." She sighed in a way that sounded genuinely tired. "The Mercer account is almost there. Fletcher thinks if we push through the last round of revisions by end of quarter, we can close it before the year rolls over." Fletcher. She said the name the way you say the name of someone who lives in your head. Rent-free. Easy. Automatic. No pause before it. No weight on it. Just a name she said the same way she said coffee or quarter or any other word that simply belonged in her mouth. That told him more than the photograph had. He nodded. "That's good," he said. "You want eggs?" She shook her head, already moving toward the door. "I'll grab something at the office. Early call?" She kissed him on the cheek. Her lips were dry and quick. "Don't forget the HOA bill is due Friday." "I've got it," he said. Then she was gone. He stood in the kitchen and listened to her car back down the driveway, and he did not move until the sound of the engine disappeared. He called Uncle Ray from the shop parking lot before he went inside. Ray picked up on the second ring. He didn't waste time on greetings, never had. "Talk," he said. Darius talked. He kept it short and factual, the way Ray had always taught him. Not because Ray didn't care about the emotional side, but because Ray believed the facts had to come first, or the emotions would push you toward decisions you couldn't take back. When he finished, there was a pause. "3 questions, Uncle Ray said. First, how long you think this has been going on? Long enough that she uses his name like it's nothing. Second, what do you lose if you blow up right now?" Darius thought about it. Really thought. Leverage, information, the element of surprise. Third, Ray's voice didn't change. "What do you need to know before you move?" The line was quiet for "Everything," Darius said. "Then go get it," Ray said. "All of it. And don't move 1 inch until you have it." That was the whole conversation. Ray didn't offer sympathy, didn't tell him he was sorry, didn't say a word about Adrian or what kind of woman she was. He just handed Darius a framework and trusted him to build inside it. It was the most useful thing anyone could have done. Jerome took one look at him when he walked into the shop and didn't say a word about what he saw on Darius's face. He just nodded once, handed him a shop rag and said, "Whatever you need, I'm here." That was enough. That was Jerome. He spent his lunch break at his desk in the back office, the shop noise muffled through the closed door, his laptop open to their joint bank account. The household account, the one they both fed into and pulled from for shared bills and groceries, and the small, ordinary expenses of a life lived together. He went back 14 months. Adrian's deposits were regular, consistent, but they were smaller than they should have been. He knew what her base salary was, They'd discussed it when she took the job, when the relocation was still a shared decision and not something that had already been decided. He pulled up the numbers he remembered, and he laid them against what he was looking at now. The gap wasn't enormous any single month, but it was consistent. Month after month, the same quiet shortfall, like water draining through a crack too small to notice unless you were looking directly at it. He was looking directly at it now. He closed the account page. He opened his contacts. He found Carol Oduya's name, a woman Adrian used to mention often, a co-worker she'd called a friend, someone she'd stopped talking about in the last year or so. He typed a message, kept it casual, low pressure, nothing that would put Carol on guard. "Hey, Carol, Adrian mentioned you've been slammed lately. Hope you're holding up." He put the phone face down on the desk. He got back to work. 4 hours later, his phone buzzed. He picked it up. Carol's message was a single sentence. "Darius, I've been meaning to call you." He read it twice. He set the phone down on the desk, very deliberately, the screen facing up this time. He picked up a pen. He pulled a blank sheet of paper toward him, and he began to write. He chose a coffee shop on the far side of South End, a quiet place called Ember and Cup that neither of them had any reason to frequent, far enough from the Holt and Meridian building that the chances of a familiar face walking through the door were close to nothing. He told Jerome where he was going. Nobody else. Carol was already there when he arrived. She had a cup of tea in front of her, both hands wrapped around it, and she was staring at the table the way people stare when they are rehearsing something in their head for the last time, before they have to say it out loud. She looked up when he sat down. Her eyes moved quickly to the door behind him, then back. "Nobody knows I'm here," he said. Simple, quiet. She nodded. Some of the tension went out of her shoulders. "I want you to know something first," he said. "Whatever you tell me today, I won't use your name. Not to anyone. Not to a lawyer. Not to Adrian. Not to anybody. You have my word." Carol looked at him for a long moment. Whatever she saw, it was enough. "There was no client dinner," she said. "Thursday night. There was nothing on the company calendar. No dinner, no client, nothing. I checked. I went back 2 weeks, and there was no Mercer meeting scheduled for that evening." Darius nodded slowly. He didn't say anything. "I've known about the two of them for a while," Carol said. Her voice was steady, but the hands around her cup tightened. "I told myself it wasn't my business. I told myself a lot of things." She stopped. "I'm not proud of that." "Carol," he said, "you're here now." She exhaled. She looked back down at the table, then back up at him. "There's more," she said. "And this part is the part I couldn't stop thinking about. The part that kept me up." He waited. "The senior director position," she said. "The one Adrian has now, and the director position before that. Both of them." She pressed her lips together. "Darius, I sit on the internal review board. I was in both of those rooms. I saw what happened." The coffee shop moved around them. A barista calling out a name, the bell above the door chiming, the low hum of other people's conversations. None of it touched the table where they were sitting. "There was another candidate," Carol said. "Both times. Her name is Brenda Moss. She has 12 years in the industry. Her numbers were better. Her reviews were better. The committee was leaning toward her both times." She paused. "Both times, Fletcher Holt overruled the committee. Personally. He stepped in at the end of the process and made the final call himself. He had the authority to do it. That didn't make it right." Darius was very still. "Adrian knows," Carol said. "I can't tell you she knows every detail of how the committee voted, but she knows those promotions didn't go through on merit alone. You can't sit in that building and not know. Fletcher Holt doesn't do anything quietly." She shook her head. "Brenda handed in her resignation 4 months ago. She never said why officially. She didn't have to." Darius heard all of it. He let it settle. He had moved to Charlotte because Adrian had been recruited for a real opportunity at a legitimate company. That was the story. That was why he'd folded up his 3 years of consulting groundwork in Atlanta and driven north with a moving truck and told himself it was the right thing, the loving thing, the thing a good partner does. He had built his life around her foundation and believed the foundation was solid. It was not her foundation. It was Fletcher Holt's, and it had been purchased with something that wasn't Fletcher's to spend, which meant the stable household, the husband who cooked and paid bills and attended HOA meetings alone. All of it had been part of the picture. The respectable home life, the evidence of a serious, grounded woman, the thing that made Adrian Wells look like exactly the kind of person a board would feel comfortable elevating. He had not just been betrayed personally, he had been used structurally, quietly, without his knowledge or consent. He sat with that for exactly as long as he allowed himself to. Then he set it aside. There would be time to feel all of it later. Right now, he had work to do. "Thank you," he said. "I mean that." Carol looked at him with something that might have been relief and something else that looked very much like guilt. "I should have said something sooner." "You said it now," he told her. "That matters." He left first. He paid for both their drinks on the way out, without making it a gesture. Patricia Onweka's office was on the 15th floor of a building in uptown Charlotte. Her waiting room was plain and clean and serious. No art on the walls meant to soothe, no soft music, just chairs, a rug, and the quiet understanding that people came here because something had broken and they needed help measuring the damage. She was a compact woman in her mid-50s, with reading glasses pushed up on her forehead and a legal pad in front of her that was already half covered in small, precise handwriting by the time Darius finished speaking. She had not interrupted him once. She looked at the photographs. She looked at the bank statements. She looked at the timeline he'd written out on his blank sheet of paper the night Carol's message came in. She set everything down and looked at him over the top of her glasses. "The more you know before you file," she said, "the less they can hide." He nodded. "I'm not filing yet," he said. Patricia Onweka looked at him, and the corner of her mouth moved in a way that was not quite a smile, but was something close to respect. "Then keep going," she said. The shop went quiet, after hours, in a way that Darius had always liked. The bays emptied out, the lifts came down, and the overhead lights dimmed to just the 2 fluorescents above the back workbench, the ones Jerome never bothered replacing with the brighter bulbs, because, as he put it, some work needs to happen in peace. This was that kind of work. Darius had brought everything in a banker's box. 8 years of statements, tax filings, payroll records, the joint account ledger, and a legal pad where he tracked numbers in 2 columns, what should have been there and what was. He spread it across the workbench, the way he would spread a disassembled transmission. Every piece in order, every piece visible. Jerome sat in his rolling chair nearby with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He was not reading. He was not on his phone. He was just there, the way he had been every evening that week, present without pressing, close without crowding. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. By Thursday, Darius had found it. He almost missed it the first time. A deposit pattern that only revealed itself when you laid 14 months of statements side by side and looked at them the way you look at an engine timing issue, not at any single moment, but at the rhythm across all of them. Something slightly off, something that didn't match. Adrienne's base salary hit their joint account like clockwork. That part was clean. But her bonus payments, the ones that should have reflected on their shared financial picture during tax season, those had been landing somewhere else. Or rather, they had been splitting. A portion to the joint account. Enough to look normal. Enough to look like what she had always told him. The rest was going somewhere he couldn't see. He went back further. 22 months. The pattern held the entire way. He got up from the stool, walked to the far bay, and stood with his hands in his pockets, looking at nothing in particular for a minute and a half. Then he walked back and sat down and added up the numbers again. $74,312, give or take. He set the pen down. "Jerome," he said. Jerome looked up. Darius turned the legal pad around and slid it across the bench. Jerome looked at the number. He looked at the two columns. He looked at the date range written across the top in Darius's handwriting. He read it all the way through the way a careful man reads something he wants to be sure he is understanding correctly. Then he set it down, and he didn't say anything for a long time. The refrigerator in the break room hummed. A car passed on the street outside. She was building an exit, Darius said. His voice was flat and even. "While I was paying the mortgage and keeping the lights on and cooking dinner, she was putting money away somewhere I'd never look." He paused. "She wasn't just cheating on me, Jerome. She was getting ready to leave. She just hadn't decided when yet." Jerome was quiet for another moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low and careful, in a way it almost never was. "She didn't just betray you," Jerome said. "She used you as scaffolding." He looked at the legal pad one more time, then back at Darius. "And she planned to knock it down the second she didn't need it anymore." Something about those words landed differently than Darius expected. Not louder, quieter. They didn't detonate. They settled, like a stone dropped into still water, sinking slowly to the bottom and resting there. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Uncle Ray's contact was a forensic accountant named Gerald Sims, a quiet, bespectacled man who worked out of a small office in Noda and whose handshakes were brief, and whose invoices were itemized down to the quarter hour. Uncle Ray had worked cases with Gerald's firm twice during his last years on the force. He said only two things about him: he finds everything, and he doesn't talk. Gerald Sims took Darius's documents, asked 6 clarifying questions, and charged a fair rate. 2 weeks later, he produced a report, clean, numbered, sourced, that traced every redirected payment, identified the private account by institution and account type, and laid out the full 22-month picture in language that would hold up anywhere. Darius read it once. He put it in the banker's box with everything else. He called Patricia Onweka and told her it was ready. The following week, he stopped into his bank branch on Central Avenue just before noon. He asked for his personal banker, a man named Andre, who had helped him structure the business accounts when Wells and Banks first incorporated. He told Andre he had some housekeeping to take care of. He wanted to make sure his business accounts were cleanly separated from any joint personal structures, and he wanted to understand exactly where his name stood on each account. He did not explain why. Andre did not ask. It took 40 minutes. When Darius walked out, nothing had moved. Nothing had been transferred. He had simply made sure of what was his and drawn a clean line around it. He got home at 6:15. Adrienne was already there, laptop open on the kitchen island, a half-eaten container of takeout beside her. "Hey," she said, without looking up. "Hey," he said. He set his keys on the hook. He washed his hands. He got a glass of water. He sat across from her at the island and ate the leftover rice she'd pushed to his side of the container without being asked. And he listened to her talk about a call she'd had with the Mercer team. And he nodded at the right times. And he asked a question that made her think he was engaged. She talked. He listened. She did not know what he knew. She did not know what he held. He looked at her across the island. This woman he had followed north. This woman he had cooked for and covered for and quietly loved for 9 years. And he felt something that was not anger, and was not grief, and was not confusion. It was clarity, cold and complete, and entirely without drama. He knew exactly what he was dealing with. It was a Tuesday night, and Adrienne had cooked. That was the first thing Darius noticed. She didn't cook on weekdays. Hadn't in years. But when he walked through the door at 6:30, the kitchen smelled like garlic and olive oil, and there was a pan on the stove and 2 actual plates set on the dining table. Not the island, the table, with cloth napkins folded beside them. She was dressed nicely for a Tuesday at home. Not dramatically, just enough. "Sit down," she said, warm and easy, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I made that pasta you like." He sat down. She brought the food over, poured them both a glass of wine he hadn't known she opened, and settled into her chair across from him with a smile that was calibrated in a way he recognized now. It was her meeting smile. The one she used when she had already decided the outcome and needed the other person to feel like they were still deciding. He picked up his fork. She let him eat a few bites before she reached down beside her chair and set a folder on the table. Clean, white, labeled with a printed tab. She hadn't just thrown this together. "I want to revisit the shop conversation," she said. Her voice was gentle, thoughtful, the voice of a woman who cared about his future. "Okay," Darius said. "I've been putting some real thought into this." She opened the folder. There were printed pages inside. Figures, a 1-page summary, something that looked like a projected timeline. She had made a presentation. "For dinner. I talked to someone in Fletcher's development division, just informally. And Darius, the opportunity is real." She slid one of the pages toward him. "Commercial real estate development. Infrastructure consulting. It's exactly what your engineering background was built for. You know that." He looked at the page. "The catch," she said, leaning forward slightly, "is that this kind of work requires liquidity and availability. You can't be tied to the shop and also be available to move when the right project comes up." She paused, letting it breathe. "Jerome could buy your half out over time. You two already talked about the structure once. It doesn't have to be complicated." She said Fletcher's name like it was a resource, like it was a gift she was offering him. Darius set the paper down. He looked at the numbers she had printed. He looked at the timeline. He looked at the folder tab, which read, in clean sans serif font, DW, Professional Transition, Options. She had named a folder after his life. "You put a lot of work into this," he said, "because I think you deserve more than what you're doing." She reached across and touched his hand briefly. A practiced warmth. "You've always been capable of more, Darius. I just want to see you get there." He nodded slowly. He turned the printed page over once, like he was reading the back. "Give me a few weeks to think it through properly," he said. She smiled. It reached her eyes this time. Genuine satisfaction. She believed him. She believed she had moved the piece where she wanted it. "Of course," she said. "No rush." She refilled his wine. He told Jerome the next morning, before the first car pulled in. He laid it out plainly, the way he told Jerome most things. No embellishment, no performance. The folder, the printed figures, the timeline with his name on the tab. Fletcher's development division, mentioned like a favor. Jerome didn't laugh. He didn't reach for a joke. He pulled a stool out from under the workbench and sat down on it slowly, like something had shifted in his knees. He was quiet for a moment. "She tried to sell you your own removal," he said. Darius didn't answer. "She sat across from you," Jerome continued, "at a dinner she cooked, with a folder she made, and tried to convince you to hand over your financial independence so that her man could put you on his payroll." He shook his head once. "That's not just betrayal. That's a move. She's thinking about position." "I know," Darius said. "She thinks you're going to do it." "I know that too." Jerome looked at him. "You're going to let her keep thinking that?" "It wasn't a question." "For now," Darius said. He pulled his jacket off the hook by the bay door and headed toward the first car in the lot. He had work to do. He had a business to open. The one he was not going to sell. To anyone, for any reason, under any story she dressed it up in. He had let her have the smile last night. He had let her believe the piece moved. But what the move had actually done was remove any remaining hesitation he had about timing. She wasn't just betraying him in the past. She was actively working to weaken what he had right now. She was clearing the board while he was still sitting at the table. That evening, he sat in his truck in the parking lot before driving home and called Uncle Ray. "It's time," Darius said when Ray picked up. "I need you to find me a way to Patrice Holt." Uncle Ray didn't explain how he made it happen. He never did. He just called back 2 days later and said there was a woman who would meet Darius at a breakfast place in Ballantyne, Friday morning at 8, and that she would be at a corner table, and that Darius should come alone. "She's not coming to make friends," Uncle Ray said. "Don't waste her time." "I won't," Darius said. And Darius. A pause. Listen more than you talk. He didn't need to be told that twice. The restaurant was the kind of place that was busy without being loud. Soft light, white tablecloths, the smell of fresh coffee and warm bread. Darius spotted her immediately. Patrice Holt was sitting with her back to the wall, a cup of tea in front of her, both hands folded around it. She was dressed simply. A gray blazer, no jewelry except small gold earrings. She looked like a woman who had spent a long time deciding not to be dramatic about anything. She watched him cross the room without expression. When he reached the table, she gestured toward the chair across from her. "Mr. Wells," she said. "Mrs. Holt?" He sat down. She looked at him for a moment, not unkindly, but with the directness of someone who had already decided what kind of meeting this was going to be. "I want to be clear about something before we start," she said. "I don't need anything from you. I have my own attorney. I have my own documentation. I've been building my own case for 8 months. "I understand," Darius said. "I'm here because Ray said you were careful and quiet and worth talking to." She picked up her tea. "And because our situations overlap in a way that makes this conversation useful." "That's exactly how I see it," Darius said. She nodded once, like he had passed something without knowing he was being tested. Then she set her tea down and reached into the bag beside her chair. She placed a manila envelope on the table between them. "Fletcher has been funding all of it through the company." Her voice was level, not flat. There was something underneath it, something held very carefully in place. Every dinner, every hotel stay. There's a corporate credit card in the name of the company's client entertainment account. He's used it at least 31 times over the past 2 years. Darius looked at the envelope but didn't touch it yet. "There's also a company-leased apartment," Patrice continued. "It's supposed to be for visiting clients. The lease is under Holt and Meridian's operating expenses. He has been using it for your wife." She said it plainly, without cruelty. Just a woman stating coordinates. "And in March of last year, there's a company expense report filed for a weekend in Asheville, listed as a site visit for a potential land acquisition." She paused. "There is no property in Asheville." There never was. The number of things Darius had not known about the last 2 years of his marriage was staggering. He had understood that going in. But each new layer still had its own particular weight. "Does the board know any of this?" he asked. "No." She said it without hesitation. "Fletcher runs the board. He built that firm, and he's spent 20 years making sure no one looks at anything he doesn't want looked at." For just a moment, something moved across her face. Not grief exactly, but the shadow of a long and very private reckoning. Then it was gone. "What's in that envelope is documented. Receipts, card statements, the lease records, the expense report." She pushed it slightly toward him. "My attorney already has the originals." Darius picked it up. It was heavier than it looked. He didn't open it at the table. "This is misappropriation," he said. "Yes." She looked at him evenly. "Depending on scale, and depending on how his attorneys want to characterize the lease structure, it may be more than that." He nodded. He set the envelope carefully on the seat beside him. They sat for a moment without speaking. The restaurant moved around them. A server refilling water glasses, a couple laughing near the window, a child tugging at her mother's sleeve. The ordinary world, doing its ordinary thing. "I'm sorry," Darius said finally, "for all of it." Patrice looked at him, and something softened, not into sadness, but into something more like recognition. Two people sitting across from each other who had both been lied to in the specific, sustained way that requires real effort from the people doing it. "So am I," she said. She picked up her tea again. "Take care of yourself, Mr. Wells." "You too, Mrs. Holt." He was at Patricia Onweka's office by 2 o'clock that same afternoon. He set the file on her desk. Everything in order. The photographs from the 6th floor. The forensic accountant's full documentation of Adrian's $74,000 account. And Patrice Holt's envelope. Contents spread across the top. Patricia took her time. She read carefully, the way she always did. Unhurried, precise, her eyes moving across each page without reaction. When she reached the last document, she set it down and looked up at him. "Tell me when you're ready," she said. Darius held her gaze. "Sunday," he said. He made the pasta first. It was a simple dish. Pappardelle with a slow butter sauce, fresh sage, a little parmesan shaved thin the way she used to ask for it. He had made it for her on their first date, in his small Atlanta apartment, with the bad overhead lighting and the single good pan he'd owned since culinary school. She had eaten 2 full bowls and laughed about it, covering her mouth with the back of her hand. He had thought right then that he was going to love her for a long time. He made the pasta now with the same care. He was not sentimental about it. He was deliberate about it. There was a difference. The kitchen was quiet. The canvas bag sat on the counter near the window. Clean, folded flat, the handles tucked neatly inside. He did not look at it while he cooked. He did not need to. Adrienne came downstairs at 6:15. She was dressed for a relaxed Sunday. Dark leggings, an oversized cream sweater. Her hair pulled back. She smelled like the lavender soap she kept on her side of the bathroom. She stopped when she saw the table set for 2. Something moved across her face. Something almost tender. "You cooked," she said. "Sit down," Darius said. Not harsh, not soft, just a direction. She sat. He brought the plates over, set hers in front of her, and sat across the table. He placed a folder beside his plate. He did not open it yet. She looked at the pasta, then up at him. "This is the first date dinner," she said quietly. "Yes," he said. She started to say something else. He spoke first. "I came to your office," he said. "That Thursday night." The color left her face so fast, it was like watching a light go out. He kept going. His voice was even, measured. Not because he wasn't feeling anything. He was feeling everything. But because he had decided a long time ago that she would not get his rage. That was his. He was keeping it. "I made you shrimp and grits," he said. "I packed your sparkling water and your hot sauce. I put it all in that bag." He nodded toward the counter without looking away from her. "The one right there. Same one you gave me. With your note still in the pocket." She turned and looked at it. He watched her look at it. "I came because I had something to tell you," he said. "Jerome had a buyer lined up for my half of the shop. A real offer. I had been thinking about it for weeks. Whether it made sense, whether it was time." He paused. "I decided it wasn't. I decided to stay, to build something here, with you. That's what I was coming to tell you." Adrienne pressed her lips together. Her hands were flat on the table now. "I saw you through the glass," Darius said. "You were on his lap. Your hand was on his chest. And you were laughing." He said it the way he would describe a car he was diagnosing. Clearly, completely, without decoration. "That's not something that happened once. I know that." She opened her mouth. "I know about the promotions," he said. "I know Fletcher overruled the committee. Both times. Carol told me. I know about Brenda Moss. He watched that land. "I know about the account with $74,000 in it that you built over the last 22 months without ever telling me it existed." He let that sit for just a second. "And I know about the company card, the client apartment, the weekend in Asheville that was logged as a site visit." He looked at her steadily. "Patrice Holt sends her regards." Adrian's face crumpled. The tears came fast. Real ones, he thought, though he was no longer certain he could tell. She pressed her fingers to her mouth. Her shoulders shook. He watched it happen. He did not reach for her hand. He did not look away. She cycled through it all. The crying. Then the explanations that started and started again. Then the anger, quick and defensive. "You were never really present. You were always more committed to that shop than to me." And then, when his face didn't change, the deflation that followed it. She looked very small in the oversized sweater. When she finally went quiet, he spoke. "I'm not here to fight," he said, "and I'm not here to beg." He held her gaze. "I want you to understand clearly what you threw away, and I want you to understand clearly what it's going to cost you." He opened the folder. He slid a single document across the table toward her. She looked down at it. He watched her read the heading, watched her read his name, and her name, and the date. That morning's date, already stamped and filed. Her hand went to her mouth again. Different this time. Darius stood up. He picked up his plate and carried it to the kitchen. He washed it, dried it, and set it in the rack. He turned off the light above the stove. Then he walked past the canvas bag, past the table where Adrian still sat motionless, and up the stairs to bed. Patricia Onweck did not send a letter. She sent a package. 14 pages, organized by category. Each item numbered, each source documented, each dollar amount cross-referenced to a corresponding receipt, calendar entry, or company record. A cover memo at the front that was 3 paragraphs long and said everything that needed saying without a single unnecessary word. It arrived at the Holt and Meridian Board Chairman's office on a Monday morning. By Wednesday, the board had retained outside counsel. Darius heard about the administrative leave from Uncle Ray, who heard it from the contact who had introduced him to Patrice. He was at the shop when the call came in, elbow deep in a brake job on a '09 Tahoe. He listened, thanked Ray, and went back to work. Jerome watched him from across the bay. "Well, Fletcher Holt is on leave," Darius said. "Pending investigation." Jerome was quiet for a moment. Then he handed Darius a clean rag. "Finish your breaks." Patrice Holt filed for divorce the same week the board investigation opened. Her attorney released the financial documentation to her legal team with the precision of someone who had been holding it a long time and was very ready to set it down. The marital home, the accounts, the years of careful documentation done by a woman who had long since stopped being surprised and had simply started being prepared. Darius never spoke to Patrice again after their single meeting. He did not need to. She had her plan. It was already in motion before he ever sat across from her. He had simply been a brief and useful parallel line, 2 people moving toward the same point from different directions. He respected that about her. The Mercer account was reassigned 11 days after the investigation opened. It had been Adrian's centerpiece. She had mentioned it in every conversation about her career for the better part of a year. The deal that was going to cement her position, the project that proved she belonged in that room. And now it was sitting in someone else's portfolio because the board could not look at anything Fletcher had touched without wondering what the real story was. Darius thought about that sometimes, not with pleasure exactly. More the way you feel when a thing you predicted comes true. A quiet, settled feeling. The kind that doesn't need a reaction. Adrienne's position at the firm did not survive the month. The board knew about the promotions now. Carol had not been the one to tell them. Darius had made that promise, and he kept it. But Patricia Onweek's package had included enough context that the board's outside counsel found their way to the same information through their own investigation. The truth had not needed much help. It just needed the door opened. Adrienne did not wait to be walked out. She submitted her resignation on a Thursday afternoon, and by Friday morning her name was gone from the company directory. Darius found out from Jerome, who had seen it mentioned in a Charlotte business newsletter, that someone had forwarded to the shop's general email. He read the 3-sentence announcement once. Then he closed his laptop and went back to the estimate he had been writing. She called him 2 weeks before the divorce was scheduled to finalize. He almost didn't answer. Then he did. Her voice was careful, controlled in the way of someone who had been rehearsing. She said she wasn't calling to relitigate anything. She just wanted to talk. One time, in person, before everything was done. She said she thought they owed each other that much. He said he would meet her once. He named the location. Uncle Ray's house on Briarwood Street was a modest brick ranch with a deep front porch and a kitchen that always smelled like coffee and old wood. Ray had lived there for 22 years. Darius had sat at that kitchen table more times than he could count. For Sunday dinners, for hard conversations, for the particular kind of silence that only felt comfortable between people who trusted each other completely. He was already inside when Adrienne arrived. Ray was at the table with his coffee, a folded newspaper beside his cup. He had not dressed up or down for the occasion. He was simply there, the way he always was, steady and unhurried, and taking up exactly as much space as he needed. Adrienne came through the door and stopped when she saw him. She recovered quickly. She was good at that. She greeted Ray with a careful politeness, took the seat across from Darius, and folded her hands on the table like she was opening a meeting. She wanted them to tell people it had been mutual. Irreconcilable differences. They had grown in different directions. A clean story, evenly shared, that protected both of them. She said the word both and looked directly at Darius. He said nothing. Uncle Ray set down his coffee cup. It made a small, flat sound on the table. He looked at Adrienne for a moment, not unkindly, but without any softness in it either. "Baby girl," he said, "you don't get to ask him for anything else." The kitchen was very quiet. Adrienne looked at Ray, then at Darius. Darius's face gave her nothing to work with. She picked up her bag. She stood. She walked to the door and let herself out, and the screen door swung shut behind her with a soft click. Darius stepped out onto the front porch a few minutes later. The evening air was cool and still. The street was quiet. Somewhere down the block, someone was mowing a late-season lawn. He stood there, and, for the first time in months, his shoulders were down. The divorce was finalized on a Tuesday morning in November. Darius sat in Patricia Onweek's office while she walked him through the final settlement documents, page by page. The way she did everything, methodically, without rushing, making sure he understood each line before they moved to the next one. The hidden account had been fully disclosed during proceedings, all $74,000 of it. Adrienne's attorney had tried to characterize it as personal savings. Patricia had been ready for that. She was always ready. Darius retained his full stake in Wells and Banks Auto. He signed where Patricia pointed. His handwriting was steady. When it was done, Patricia stood and offered her hand. He shook it. She said she hoped he would move forward well. He told her he intended to. He drove back to the shop and worked a full afternoon. The Charlotte house went on the market the following week. It was a good house. 4 bedrooms, a renovated kitchen, a backyard with a poured concrete patio that Darius had laid himself the summer after they moved in. He had poured every section of it. Adrienne had supervised from a lawn chair with a glass of wine, calling out encouragement she thought was helpful. He had loved that afternoon. He did not let himself dwell on it. He had a moving company scheduled and boxes that needed filling, and he had learned by now that memory was most dangerous when you stopped moving. The house sold in 9 days. The news about Fletcher came through the Charlotte Business Journal. A short article, the kind that tries to be measured and ends up being damning simply through the facts it presents. Fletcher Holt had been formally removed from his position as CEO of Holt and Meridian Group following the conclusion of the board's internal investigation. The firm was restructuring under an interim executive team. A statement from the board thanked Fletcher for his years of service in the specific, hollow way that means the opposite of what it says. Darius read the article once, on his phone, standing in the empty kitchen of the Charlotte house the morning the last of his boxes came out. Fletcher was renting a place in Huntersville now. Darius didn't know the details and hadn't sought them out. He only knew what Jerome had mentioned in passing, that someone who used to work at the firm had seen Fletcher at a grocery store, looking like a man who had recently discovered that the world no longer arranged itself around him. He had no particular feeling about that. It was simply the shape of what happened to men like Fletcher when the structure that protected them finally gave way. Patrice had the marital home. She had the accounts, the assets, the carefully documented evidence of a life she had been preparing to reclaim for 8 months before anyone knew she was preparing. Darius had thought about her sometimes during the months that followed their single meeting, not with sentimentality, but with a quiet recognition. She had done everything right. She had simply been waiting for the right time, and she had known exactly what to do when it arrived. He hoped she was well. He had the sense she was. Adrienne did not disappear. That was not how the world worked. She resurfaced at a smaller firm 3 months after her resignation, a real estate services company, regional, mid-market. A step down in title and a significant step down in visibility. She was starting a section of her career over, without Fletcher's protection, without the senior director title, and with the quiet weight of professional circles that were not large enough for the truth to stay contained. She did not reach out to Darius. He did not reach out to her. There was nothing left to say. She knew what she had done. He knew what she had done. The accounting was complete. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, Darius Wells was sitting at a desk in a small office in Atlanta's West Midtown district. The space was modest. Exposed brick, 2 windows, a second-hand desk he had refinished himself, a hand-lettered sign on the door that read, Meridian Engineering Consultants, in clean, simple letters. His phone buzzed. Jerome. Best month the shop has ever had. You believe that? Pulled the numbers this morning. Thought you should know. Darius typed back. I believe it. You earned it. A minute later, his phone buzzed again. Uncle Ray. A single word. Proud. Darius looked at it for a moment. Then he set the phone face down on the desk, pushed his chair back, and carried his coffee to the door. Outside, Atlanta moved the way it always had, loud and layered, full of itself, alive. The morning air had a bite to it. He stood on the sidewalk and let it reach him. He was not bitter. He had checked for it the way you check an engine for a slow leak, carefully, honestly, willing to find what was there. And it wasn't there. Bitterness meant she still had a room inside him. She did not. He had cleared that space out with the same patience he had used for everything else, and what was left was just him. Just Darius. The version that had existed before he became someone's scaffolding. Because that was the thing about scaffolding. It was never supposed to be permanent. It was always meant to come down. And when it did, when he had finally, deliberately, removed his hands, what was still standing was his. He finished his coffee. He went back inside. He sat at his desk, opened the proposal he had been drafting, and got to work. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.